I was switched at birth, and I found out when I was 20 years old. It sounds like a wild conspiracy theory, but I swear this is my reality. Never in my life did I think my ordinary life could suddenly turn into such a damn drama. My name is Ryan. I always thought I lived a normal life, a small town in Ohio, parents, a brother, and a ton of memories of growing up, going to school, playing basketball, and so on. You know, a typical American life. But everything changed the day I stumbled upon a document in an old family cabinet. It was a medical record. It had my name, my date of birth. Everything was correct. But under blood type, something was off. I've always had AB blood type. Doctors had mentioned it since I was a kid, but the document listed my blood type as O. A small detail, right? But it made me pause. I casually brought it up over dinner with my parents. Something like, weird, why is there a discrepancy? My mom looked at me strangely, not angry but tense. And my dad suddenly started fiddling with his phone, pretending to check something, even though he absolutely hates technology. Okay, I thought, it's nothing. I'm overthinking. But then my mom said, Ryan, it's just a mistake in the paperwork. These things happen. Let's leave it in the past. Her voice was too strained. That's not like her. She's always been the kind of mom who answers any question head on. But this wasn't right. And that something's not right feeling wouldn't leave me alone. The next day I decided to take a DNA test, just for fun. Like, oh, let's see who my ancestors were. My brother Jake and I always teased each other about it. You're probably half Scottish, with how pale and red-haired you are. So I sent the test off without much thought. But damn, when the results came back, I felt like my heart stopped. Under the relatives section, my parents weren't listed. And that was just the first step in uncovering the truth that turned my life upside down. When I saw the results, I literally shut my laptop and stepped away from the table. My heart was pounding like I'd just run a marathon. This had to be a mistake, right? DNA tests could be wrong, couldn't they? I Googled it. No, mistakes were nearly impossible. I checked the results again. They were clear. Neither mom nor dad were my biological parents. I was in complete shock. It felt like someone had taken everything I knew about my life and thrown it out the window. I tried to calm down, but one thought kept spinning in my head. Who the hell are my real parents? That night, I sat on the couch with my mom. Dad had already gone to bed, but I decided this was my chance. I couldn't keep this bottled up any longer. Mom, I said, my voice trembling slightly, have you ever heard of DNA tests? She looked up from her book. Of course. Why? I took one recently, just out of curiosity. Her smile disappeared. She suddenly looked oddly tense. Really? She asked, trying to sound casual, but I could already sense that something was off. Yeah, and the results were strange, I continued. They said we're not related. How is that even possible? For a few seconds, the room was filled with this crushing silence, like someone had turned off all the sound around us. Mom was staring at me, and I was staring back at her. Ryan, she began, but her voice faltered. Listen, it's probably just a mistake. You know those tests aren't always accurate. No, Mom, they're accurate, I said, holding her gaze. Is there something you want to tell me? And that's when I saw her eyes start to glisten. She stood up, walked over to the kitchen window, and stared outside for a while. Ryan, she finally exhaled, I should have told you earlier. I stood up, feeling my heart sink into my stomach. Told me what? My voice cracked because deep down I already knew the answer. She turned to face me. You're not our biological son. I don't know what was more terrifying, how calmly she said it, or the fact that I felt like my entire world was crumbling beneath me. She explained that there had been a mix-up at the hospital. Her labor had been difficult, and that day there was chaos due to an emergency situation. They brought me to her, and she was certain I was her baby. But a couple of months later, doubts began to creep in. You didn't look like us, she whispered, but the doctors assured us everything was fine. We just decided to leave it as it was. You were our son. You are our son. I stood there listening to her, feeling like I was watching a movie. But the movie was about my life, and I couldn't hit pause. So you knew all this time? I asked, my voice still shaky. She nodded, and that broke me. We loved you, Ryan. We didn't want you to feel different. You're part of our family. Those words didn't help. My mind was a mess. I went to my room and just sat on my bed, trying to process everything. The next day, I made a decision. I was going to find my biological parents, no matter what it might mean for my family. This was only the beginning of the journey. The morning started with a headache. Not from a hangover, though honestly, I felt like getting drunk just to forget all these messed up revelations. I was just sitting at my laptop scrolling through my DNA test results over and over. You know how detectives in movies pin all the clues to a board, connect them with strings, and then just stare at it? That's exactly how I felt, except I didn't have any strings. My first thought was to reach out to the company that ran the test. They had this relative finder feature. If anyone in my biological family had ever taken the test, we might have a match. And then things got even weirder. A couple of hours after I activated the feature, the system found a match. I was connected to someone named Andrew Miller. Who the hell is Andrew Miller? I messaged him using the platform's built-in chat. The text was short and as neutral as possible. Hi, Andrew. I took a DNA test, and it looks like we're related. Can we talk? Honestly, I didn't think he'd respond at all. But about 20 minutes later, I got a reply. Hey, that's interesting. What kind of connection are we talking about? I took a deep breath. Answering that question was harder than I thought. Based on the data, we could be brothers, or maybe cousins. I need more details myself. A few minutes later, he replied, Damn, brothers, seriously, that's wild. I already have a brother, though. His name's Zach. But okay, let's talk. We agreed to chat that evening. The whole day I was a nervous wreck, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. What was I even going to say? Hey, man, I think we got swapped at birth? It sounded insane. By evening, I mustered the courage to call. Andrew turned out to be a guy about my age with a raspy voice. He was friendly, but I could sense a hint of wariness in his tone. So, Ryan, he began, you're saying we're brothers? Not exactly, I said, feeling my headache intensify. You see, I recently found out that my parents, well, they're not my biological parents. I was probably switched at birth, and your DNA is the only match I've found. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Switched? He repeated. Wait, are you serious? I'm serious. Andrew exhaled deeply. Ryan, this is crazy. My family never had any suspicions that there was anything off about me or my brother. But, now that you mention it, I do remember something strange. What do you mean? Well, he hesitated. When I was a teenager, we had this random dinner conversation at home, and my dad mumbled something about the hospital. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it sounded odd, like something happened when I was born, but he quickly changed the subject, and I didn't think much of it at the time. My palms were sweating. Can you ask him about it? I asked. Look, I can try, but he's not the kind of guy who opens up about stuff like this. He's pretty private. We agreed that Andrew would try to talk to his dad, but before we hung up, he said something that made my blood run cold. By the way, you said you were switched at birth. Do you know who your real parents are? No, I admitted honestly. There was a pause. Maybe my parents. After that conversation, I couldn't sleep at all. The next day, I couldn't eat or think about anything else. My head was spinning. If what Andrew said turned out to be true, it would mean my entire life was some kind of elaborate mistake, or worse, someone's negligence. Toward the evening, Andrew messaged me. Call me in an hour. Talk to my dad. Looks like we've got a crappy family secret. I literally felt my legs go weak. An hour later, I was sitting on my bed, phone in hand, trying not to panic, but it was impossible. Andrew, I said the moment he picked up. What did he say? Andrew sighed, the kind of sigh someone lets out when they're about to share a story they haven't fully processed themselves. I talked to my dad. He didn't want an answer at first, but when I pushed, he finally admitted it. Listen, this is seriously insane. What? Just tell me, I snapped, gripping the phone tightly. When I was born, Andrew began, my mom was in bad shape, and she had to have a C-section. My dad said there was some mix-up with the newborns. A nurse accidentally switched the ID tags on the bassinets. They even joked at the time saying, all babies look the same. What? I nearly dropped the phone. They raised a fuss about it back then. The doctors assured them everything was fine and that there was no way the babies could have been switched. But apparently my dad always had doubts. He said it crossed his mind every now and then, but he didn't know how to prove it, and he didn't want to stir things up. Wait, are you saying... I started, but Andrew interrupted. Ryan, I think you're the baby that was given to the wrong family back then. I felt a chill spread through my entire body. So, your parents might actually be mine? Seems like it, he said quietly. For a moment, there was silence. It was too much. I didn't even know what to say. Everything I thought I knew about myself had just been turned upside down. Ryan, do you want me to talk to my parents? Andrew asked cautiously. Yes, I said, but I think I need to do it too. Andrew agreed, and we decided I would meet his parents that weekend. Those few days were the worst of my life. How do you explain that you can't even look your parents in the eye because all you can think about is, if they're not my biological parents, then who is? I arrived at the Miller's house on Saturday, a small, well-kept house with a green lawn. Everything looked too normal for a place hiding such a crazy secret. Andrew came out to meet me. He looked just as tense as I felt. They're waiting inside, he said. I nodded, my palms sweating. Inside, I was greeted by his parents, Tom and Linda Miller. They seemed warm, but I could see Tom trying to mask his discomfort. Linda just stared at me, and her eyes felt eerily familiar. After some small talk, we all sat down in the living room. Tom started speaking. Ryan, we're truly sorry that you're in this situation. When Andrew told us about your test, I couldn't ignore the fact that this might be connected to something that happened years ago. He paused as if searching for the right words. When you were born, he continued, I believe you really might have been our baby. I felt my stomach twist. So what am I supposed to do now? I asked. Linda, who had been silent this whole time, suddenly spoke. Ryan, I don't know how to say this, but ever since you walked into this house, I can't shake the feeling that you look like Tom. Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning. Are you saying I might be your son? I managed to ask. We need to confirm it, Tom said. But, yes. We agreed to do a DNA test as a family to get to the bottom of this. The test results came back a week later. I sat at the same table as the first time, opening the file with trembling hands, my heart about to burst. And there it was, a 99.9% match. Tom and Linda Miller were my biological parents. Reading that was both a relief and a nightmare. My heart felt torn. I didn't know what to do with this new reality. The mom and dad who raised me were still my family. But now I had another family, a family I never knew existed. When I shared the DNA test results with the parents who raised me, their reaction was heartbreaking. We sat in the living room, which had always felt cozy but now felt more like an interrogation room. So it's true, Dad said quietly, leaning back on the couch. Mom looked at me, her eyes red, as if she'd already cried before I even got there. Ryan, she began, her voice trembling. I know this changes everything, but you have to understand. We've never thought of you as not ours. You are our son. You always will be. I know, Mom, I replied, but my voice sounded hollow. But now, I have two families. The words hung in the air. I could see how much Mom struggled with them, as if I just told her I was planning to leave. Dad, always the quieter one, stayed composed, but I knew it hurt him too. Are you going to see them? He asked finally. I hesitated. I already have, I admitted. And honestly, I can't just ignore this. Mom broke into tears. It was then that I realized no matter how hard I tried, there wouldn't be a happy ending here. Someone was always going to feel left out. Over the next few weeks, I tried to balance both families. I had dinners with Tom and Linda, getting to know them, asking about Andrew's childhood and their life. Tom shared stories that could have been mine if things had gone differently. But every time I came back home, I felt the tension. Mom and Dad tried to keep it together, but I could see how much my efforts to connect with my other family hurt them. Ryan, I just don't want to lose you, Mom said one night. You don't understand what it's like to raise a child and then find out he might not be yours. You're not losing me, Mom. I tried to reassure her. I'll always be your son. And them? She asked, looking at me as if trying to figure out where she stood in my life now. I didn't know what to say. After a few months, living in this dual world started to weigh on me. Two families, two sets of parents, and me stuck in the middle. Each wanted me to be theirs. Each wanted me to choose. One day, Mom called me into the kitchen. She was holding a box labeled Ryan. "This is yours," she said, placing it in front of me. I opened the box and found things from my childhood. Photos, drawings, even my first pair of baby shoes. "This is everything you are to us, Ryan," she said. "You are our life." I looked at her and felt a lump rise in my throat. "Mom, you'll always be my mother." "No one can ever change that," I said. The next day I met with Tom and Linda. We sat in their living room, and I tried to explain how I felt. "You gave me life," I said, looking at them, "but they gave me everything else." Linda smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "We don't want to take you away from them, Ryan," she said. "Just know that you're always welcome with us, if you want to be." I realized then that I didn't have to choose one family. I could be part of both, if they allowed it. In the end, I found balance. The mom and dad who raised me remained my foundation, my greatest support. But I also began building a relationship with Tom, Linda, and Andrew. It wasn't easy, but I knew the only way forward was to accept everything that had happened to me and to be honest with both families. This isn't a story about a perfect ending. It's about losing yourself and finding something greater. Yes, I was switched at birth, but now I understand that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who love you, no matter what. And all of them chose to stay.